So last week I filmed a video on this topic. I filmed it all. I went to edit it on Monday, and then I was like, wow, I actually have a lot more to say on this topic than I thought I did. So I rewrote everything I wanted to say, and here we are, refilming it. This video is about the relationship between fundamentalism and art. It's a very broad topic, so there will be a lot more to say beyond what I'm saying in this video, but I find this topic to be really interesting and something worth talking about. This feels like a very niche part of my deconstruction, something that I didn't put much thought into before and I'm putting a lot of thought into recently. And I just didn't really realize how much fundamentalism impacted my ability to engage with art and participate when it came to art. And when I say art, this is a broad spectrum here. I'm talking about art, it could be paintings, it could be drawings, it could be types of art, it could be music, books, things in games. The list is endless. It's endless. So that is what I'm talking about when I say art. I mean a lot of different mediums here. Some aspects of how fundamentalism religion interacts with art isn't very shocking and is actually well known. And sometimes these things I didn't really put two and two together. I didn't really put these two things together, the Satanic Panic and how that whole thing is just about how fundamentalism interacts with all sorts of different art. But one part of how fundamentalism interacts with art that is well known is the Satanic Panic. I'm sure a lot of you know what that is, but for those of you who don't, the Satanic Panic was a moral panic primarily in the 1980s and early 1990s, characterized by widespread fears that satanic cults were secretly abusing children, infiltrating society, and influencing popular culture despite a lack of credible evidence for a vast organized conspiracy. Like I said, I'm sure a lot of you who have grown up in fundamentalist religion, or even if you haven't, I'm sure you've had some kind of experience of people being quick to put weird demonic conspiracy narratives onto something. It could be really anything. Although a lot of times when you look up Satanic Panic, it talks about how it was very popular in the 80s and 90s. I would argue it's still very much alive today. It just comes in slightly different forms, but overall the moral panic remains the exact same. I would say that art plays almost every role in Satanic Panic. From movies, to music, to games, both video games and board games, to physical paintings or artwork, to TV shows, to books, even to brand logos. The list goes on. And I want to start by sharing my first experience with art being demonized through D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. And yes, this game involves a lot of art. You're literally world building with your mind, your imagination. There's visual art, there's storytelling, there's character creations, performance art, etc. Anyways, I was growing up in the early 2000s and the Satanic Panic, I feel like I say that weird, was very much thriving. This demonization of D&D came through, for me, it came through an episode of Adventures in Odyssey on a cassette tape. And if you don't know what Adventures in Odyssey is, which if you grew up evangelical and your family participated in a lot of this stuff, focus on the family put out, you're probably very familiar with Adventures in Odyssey as a kid, but it is a Christian audio drama series created by Focus on the Family that uses fictional stories, reoccurring characters, and their adventures to teach moral lessons and Christian values to children. This episode about D&D was episode 122, and it was titled Castles and Cauldrons instead of, being called directly Dungeons and Dragons. There was a part 1 and a part 2. It was an extra long, dramatic episode. So I'm going to give you the summary of what happens in this episode. So in this episode, there's a character, his name is Jimmy, and Jimmy has a cousin who is coming over to stay at their house for a bit. His cousin's name is Len. Typically, Jimmy and Len have played together in the past. They had been used to playing games together, but this time, Len wanted to show Jimmy a new game they could play together. So scary. Len tells Jimmy the game is called Castles and Cauldrons, and it includes role-playing as specific characters. Len becomes Luther, the magician, and Jimmy becomes John Dell the apprentice. Now, as Len is getting Jimmy to play this game, he comes off as super manipulative and secretive. He tells Jimmy to not tell the adults because they wouldn't get it. Those adults include Jimmy's parents and somebody named Mr. Whitaker. For those of you who haven't watched or listened to the show, Mr. Whitaker is a main adult character in the show, and he basically has this shop / library / ice cream shop. I don't know. It's weird. But he is basically the main adult in the show that is like interacting with these kids a lot during their Christian moral lessons they're learning. Jimmy isn't really sure about this whole thing. He gets peer pressured into playing this game with Len. The more they play this game, the more creeped out Jimmy becomes. Because Len seems to be getting a little unhinged and a little too into the game. Len starts talking about the possibility of real magic and gaining real powers. So as they depict Len as becoming a little bit too obsessed with the game, at some point Jimmy's sister is upset that someone destroyed and tore apart one of her dolls, and it is heavily implied that Len did this because, he's a little deranged, and he's slowly becoming more deranged as they continue to play Castles and Cauldrons. Jimmy's parents also tell Jimmy at some point that Len isn't actually just visiting for fun. He's visiting because his parents have been worried about him, and he's been having trouble back home. He's been hanging out with the wrong crowd. So Len is basically staying with them to maybe get a fresh start or get away from these other troubled teens. So the picture is Len is a troubled kid and he needs some help. On top of this, at some point, Jimmy tells Mr. Whitaker about the game they are playing, and Mr. Whitaker warns Jimmy that some of these games can be very dangerous. They can become really scary, but he's kind of vague about it. So the episode progresses, and again, Len is getting more and more into the game, and the more and more Len gets into the game, the more creeped out Jimmy becomes. But at some point, Jimmy says that he's creeped out, and Len goes, Jimmy might be creeped out, but John Dell the apprentice actually likes this, so we're gonna do what John Dell wants. So basically, he's like, F you, we're doing what John Dell wants. Bye, Jimmy. You're not real anymore. So we come to the climax of the episode. And I won't lie to you, it's really hard to explain what happens. And even when you go to the wiki, the Adventures in Odyssey wiki, about part 2 of this episode of Castles and Cauldrons, the explanation of this episode is so short and lacks any kind of detail. And there was some kind of comment on the page saying this description was not very helpful. Essentially, Len tells Jimmy they need to do a Castles and Cauldrons initiation. Jimmy isn't really into this anymore. He's officially like, okay, this is too much. The situation starts to escalate very quickly. Len tries to get Jimmy to partake in a blood ritual thing by cutting his thumb. Then Len is trying to summon, he's doing all this, and Len is saying that he's summoning a wizard named Shaman? I don't know. He's a wizard, okay? That's what I know. But the music / sound effects used in this episode are to imply that Len is actually summoning some kind of evil spirits. It's no longer his imagination or a game. While this is getting crazy, Jimmy's dad and Mr. Whitaker actually find them, and they grab the game itself and destroy it. We don't really know what that entails because I don't think the episode tells us what they're actually using for the game. I'm guessing it's some kind of game board or dice or something, like they do for D&D. And on top of destroying the game, they actually get Len help. I don't really know what kind of help that is. It kind of seems like maybe mental health help or something. But yeah, Len was a troubled teen, and they finally helped him. So this entire message of the story is games like D&D can be a gateway into summoning demons and or worshiping the devil, some kind of Satan worship. And you should warn your kids about partaking in these kind of role-playing games, because obviously it can get very dangerous. I mean, we just heard about this on Avengers and Odyssey. Now, I'm sure the focus on the family founder, his name is James Dobson. I'm sure a lot of you know about James Dobson. And a lot of the awful things he taught Christian parents to do to their kids. And for a lot of kids, it severely traumatized them. Because a big thing he advocated for was hitting your kids. But anyways, that's some little insight into who he was. Anyways, he really warned parents to not let their kids play this kind of fantasy game, and even though it might seem innocent, they involve magic, which is not from Christianity, therefore it is wrong, it is demonic. But I do want to note, James Dobson wasn't the first one to create this panic around this game. This idea had already made its way into evangelicalism, so episodes like this from Adventures in Odyssey was just echoing a message that already existed about things like D&D being demonic and being involved in summoning demons and worshiping Satan, some kind of devil worship. As a young child, this episode absolutely scared the shit out of me. I'm trying to remember how old I was when I was listening to this, but I was definitely very young. Like, I was definitely in elementary school. But genuinely, for the most part of my childhood, I did think it was dangerous and a scary game. Basically, the equivalent to a Ouija board that people use to summon demons and Satan or interact with Satan. And again, this is just my personal experience. This type of satanic panic manifests itself in many different ways, like I said. I went to a private Christian school until 6th grade, so you saw this in all sorts of different areas. I saw this in movies. A big one for me growing up was the Da Vinci Code. If you know, you know. This movie was talked about a lot when I was growing up, and it was seen as heretical. They saw this movie as something going against their religion. And then also another big one was horror movies, obviously. I mean, that makes sense to me. With the horror movies specifically, I had friends who, I don't think I was really allowed to watch them. I don't remember. When I was a teenager, I think it was like whatever. But I did have friends that they weren't really allowed to watch horror movies because parents believed that evil or bad juju from the movie would like enter their house. So that was a big thing for me growing up, and I've definitely heard that over and over again. This was also seen in TV shows. Many parents did not want their kids watching shows like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which is obviously because they viewed it as, like, they talked about the witchcraft in it. Also, pause. It's still very ironic to me that the woman who plays Sabrina from Sabrina the Teenage Witch ended up in being God's Not Dead 2. Full circle, I guess. Some evangelical parents did not want their kids watching Pokemon because the show talks about evolving and evolution. And if you know anything about young Earth creationists, you know they do not believe in evolution. And on top of that, these pocket monsters. These pocket monsters had power, and only God should hold these kinds of powers. Side note, I'm very thankful my parents did not see Pokemon this way, or else a big chunk of my childhood would be erased, as you can tell. I also did not put the concept of the Pokemon evolving into the same category as actual evolution that is taught in science for some reason.
Are you stupid or something?
Probably because I didn't know a lot about evolution, so it makes sense that since I was raised young Earth creationist, I wasn't putting 2 and 2 together at all. But I don't think my parents were either, which is kind of surprising, or they didn't care. I'm not sure. I saw this in books. An obvious one is Harry Potter. Obviously, it's witchcraft. It's obviously not from God. I saw this in games, like my example with D&D. And then back again to games like Pokemon. I have seen this in music. When I was pretty young, I remember me and most of my friends were not allowed to listen to too much secular music. And in a way I get it. Like, obviously, if the secular songs are not saying stuff age appropriate, I do get that to a certain extent. So I don't really have too much to say on that. But one thing I think about a lot is how demonized certain types of music were as they developed. An obvious one is rock music, especially in the 60s to 80s. Also, if you remember those rumors of, oh, play this rock record backwards and you hear some kind of demonic message coming from the record, that rock musicians were secretly embedding the satanic, anti-Christian, or occult messages into the songs, and listeners would absorb these messages subconsciously, and even if they couldn't consciously hear them. Now, obviously this wasn't during my childhood, but I still actually heard about this a decent amount growing up, and I feel like I heard about it when I was pretty young. Not to mention the amount of times I have seen the demonization of musical artists online specifically, when people call artists demonic, possessed, or whatever, when they sing or dance or act in a certain way that fundamentalists do not like. For example,
the music industry is demonic.
Dolce music is demonic.
I think a lot of us have figured out that there's a lot of satanic things going on in the music industry right now.
The fans said it was very demonic.
And people will still say that it's just a song, it's just art.
Every day, the world is becoming more godless and demonic.
Beyonce has a demon.
Now, I could make a compilation of those kind of videos that last hours, but we don't have all day. I have even seen this in food logos. I'm sure you guys have seen this classic video.
There's a gap right here in the letter M. It's never connected. So you go into Hebrew. The letter Vav is also the number 6. Short top, long tail. Short top, long tail. You could have here in Hebrew 666 on the can. But my interest is the word monster. What do you see in the O? There's a cross. Okay. What has Christ got to do with an energy drink, let alone the name Monster? So I thought, well, maybe this is a Christian company then. DFC at the bottom of the can. Do you know what that stands for? That's the F word. Big can. In fact, they write it on the side of the can, so I know that's the F word. Okay. Now, do you know what a MILF is?
Although, I will say, I feel like the food and drink logo thing is not a widespread thing. It is a little more niche and just a little bit more insane, honestly. As I get older, I realize this even applied to physical works of art, like a painting or a sculpture. I recognized how often fundamentalists did not like art that was abstract, and anything that may not give like a clear, direct image or message, something that didn't paint a clear picture for them. Here is an example. This is a popular Christian conservative commentator, Michael Knowles, talking about how he essentially thinks abstract art is talentless and stupid, but this actually isn't an uncommon thing in fundamentalism. There have actually been studies done about this specific topic, and I'm going to read the abstract from this one study, and I will also link it in the description if you are interested in reading it. Hypothesize on the basis of proposition that a generalized fear of uncertainty is the psychological variable which accounts for organization of social attitudes along a general factor of liberalism, conservatism, that conservatives would express an aversion to highly complex and abstract artworks. 20 paintings were chosen by an art expert, 5 to represent each of the 4 categories differing in degree of uncertainty: simple representational, simple abstract, complex representational, and complex abstract. 16 female and 14 male, 23 to 34 years old, made preference judgments for each painting and completed the conservatism scale. As predicted, high scores on the conservatism scale preferred paintings in the simple representational category and showed a definite dislike for the complex representational and complex abstract works. Complexity dimension was the primarily discriminator of the judgment of liberals and conservatives. In fundamentalism, a lot of times there is not a lot of room for nuance and gray areas. Otherwise, things wouldn't be black and white, and they would be a lot less simple, and there would be way more interpretation and discussion, and it wouldn't be this good, this bad, or, this is the villain and this is the good guy. I think of art that relates to this. I actually think of Salvador Dali. He's known for his surrealism. His paintings often depict something you would possibly see in a dream. But if you think about it, this stuff is obviously not possible in the real world, and it also doesn't align with the Christian worldview either. So it makes sense to me why artwork like this would make a fundamentalist religious person uncomfortable. Just like my example of D&D, too much creativity, too much exploration, too much imagination can be deemed demonic. It can be deemed unchristian because, again, it's not clear cut. Now, obviously, this is not to say there's no art within super religious communities. Obviously, there are artists who are super religious. I mean, when I go to Europe, I love to see the beautiful artworks there. I love to go see the beautiful churches. And I just look at it, as a product of humans and their minds. Ironically, their imaginations. But, again, that imagination, it's so interesting to think about the fact that religion has so much to do with imagination, but then that type of imagination puts restrictions on what type of imagination you can have, which is very ironic to me. But therefore, your creativity is going to be limited. If your exploration is limited, your creativity is limited, your ability to engage and create art, I think, is then limited. I think that's why a lot of times conservative fundamentalist art in modern day is not very successful. For example, a popular evangelical streaming service is called Pureflix. If you've ever watched it, you just know how bad these movies truly are. Same with the God's Not Dead series, which is arguably the biggest named movies in that space, in the evangelical space. I actually did a video on every single one of these movies. I did a series on it if you want to go watch it. But the God's Not Dead series is probably the most popular Christian fundamentalist movies there are. And if you go watch my videos on them, they're a very hard watch. They're not very creative, they're not very honest, and it feels like you're strictly watching propaganda. And propaganda that's not even creative in any kind of way, in my opinion. But as expected, they're very black and white. It's the typical big evil atheist versus good Christian white man. And that makes sense. It's simple, it's easy. It reinforces their idea that, that the devil and atheists are out to get you, and that Christians are persecuted, and that God will win in the end. It's very simple. It's very easy. Another example of modern day conservative fundamentalist art is an animated show called Mr. Bertram.
Oh my God, what is that? Oh my God, what is that?
This is produced by The Daily Wire. If you don't know what The Daily Wire is, it's a conservative media company co-founded by Ben Shapiro. Enough said. No, but if you don't know who Ben Shapiro is, he's a popular conservative commentator.
Whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. Hold up. I said certified freak 7 days a week. Wet ass P-word. Make that pull out game week. Just want to make sure these ladies get the care they need. My wife's medical advice is that they go to a gynecologist.
Anyways, they tried to make this a comedy animated show, something like Bob's Burgers or Family Guy, but conservative fundamentalist version. It was a giant flop, unsurprisingly. People found it painfully unfunny and not appealing visually either with their animation. On Rotten Tomatoes, the popcorn meter is at a 31%, which honestly seems extremely high, in my opinion. But it is being watched by probably mostly conservatives, so I understand it. But don't take my word for it, let's read some reviews about it. A review by John Kay says, series is so terrible that it beats out Chinese drip torture, I don't know what that is, and waterboarding as a new preferred method of inhumane torture. Okay, some pretty strong feelings there. A review by Molly S. says, absolute drivel is an understatement. I'd laugh more if I had hemorrhoids. I'm embarrassed for the human race that a group of us actually produced this pile of shite. And the last review we'll read is from CJ. I tried giving it a chance. I tried watching it, but God, I cannot stand it. I understand it's a political comedy and I'm middle of the road, so I love to take every opportunity to make fun of Democrats and Republicans alike, but this is just unfunny. The jokes aren't even that clever. There are 3 types of jokes in this show. Number 1, liberals, am I right? Number 2, black people, am I right? And number 3, women, am I right? Elect any originality or thought. I've seen better jokes posted on Twitter and have heard more interesting political ideals in a Call of Duty lobby. The only thing I can give the show is that the cast of the voice actors are doing a good job, and the animations is fairly alright, but it's nowhere near enough to save the mess of a show. 1 out of 10 would not recommend. It honestly seems, in my opinion, hard for fundamentalists to keep up with the culture we are living in terms of the arts, and that affects pretty much everything. But that also makes sense considering they are consistently shitting on the arts at every opportunity possible, at least from my experience, probably because too often the arts are producing things that are outside of their strict agenda, which, yeah, typically that's why the art is good in the first place. So I want to emphasize that art can be done in a religious context. Obviously, I'm not saying it can't, but modern day conservative fundamentalism is uniquely, in my opinion, horrible at creating anything in the arts, and it makes sense because it is consistently about conformity. It's boring, it lacks exploration, it lacks creativity, yada yada yada. I'm saying the same thing. Every time I think about what fundamentalist conservatives would want this country to look like, I think of that episode from The Fairly Odd Parents when Timmy basically wished that everybody was the same, and so everybody turned into gray blobs. There was no individuality at all. Everything was the same. Everything was extremely boring. So it's pretty simple to see why they're also always shitting on people who choose to express themselves in any way they don't deem acceptable. So that's why there's always people saying blue-haired liberal or septum ring theory. They think these are sick burns because they're burns to them. To them, it's such a sick burn that you're not conforming to what they want you to conform to. This also makes sense when it comes to their transphobia. Transgender people and even gay people are not fitting in the boxes they want them to, therefore they're bad. But one last thing I want to share is one noticeable difference I experienced when deconstructing religion in relation to art. In 2023, I went to Thailand with my two friends, and of course we were visiting a lot of Buddhist temples. They were huge, they were incredible, they were beautiful, there was so much art to see. And I had this realization that I no longer had to go through the thought process of, oh no, these people believe in the wrong religion. These people have the wrong worldview and they're gonna burn in hell because of this. These poor people, they're gonna all burn in hell because they don't believe like me. And I know for a fact there will be Christians who will say, well, that's a you problem. You shouldn't think like that. And that's not due to Christianity. That's your fault. I'm sorry, if you tell somebody that everybody around them who doesn't believe like them is going to burn in hell forever, it's kind of a hard thing to ignore. It's kind of a hard thing not to think about. When you go travel to a different country, you learn about someone's culture, you meet them, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, this is so beautiful, whatever. You get to know different people. And then, yeah, you're gonna be thinking about the fact that you were taught that they're supposedly gonna burn in hell. That's kind of a hard thing to ignore. It's funny because I even saw a video the other day where a Christian was at a Buddhist temple and he's like, man, it's so sad all these people are gonna burn in hell. That's how I know my experience of thinking like that is not unique. It's not, for obvious reasons. It is pounded into your belief system. But it was nice to be free from those thoughts and worries. I didn't have to think that way. And when thinking about this, I thought about the Buddhist Walk for Peace. When I actually got to see the Buddhist Walk for Peace that happened this past year. I traveled to Virginia to see them walk one day, and it was very inspirational. It gave me a lot of hope. It made me feel so good to see people gathered around for this. But there were also viral videos I saw of Christians that would stop them on their walk and basically tell them that they're believing the wrong thing and they're going to go to hell.
Your fellow monks to tell you that what you're doing is you're walking your way to hell, and I don't want that for you.
And that kind of sums it up for me. Mind you, these people are walking for peace, and the Christian nationalists in this country are causing so much of the division and hostility. That is the big contributor for them walking in the first place. So all of that is super ironic to me. I also thought about when I went to the Louvre in Paris and saw these artifacts from ancient Egypt, and I can just appreciate human culture for what it is, and I'm not lost in this process of those poor people, they're burning in hell because they worship the wrong gods. It's nice to not have that in the back of my mind anymore, honestly. Anyways, that's about it. As always, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on this. I love reading my comments and seeing you guys' perspective on all these topics. Maybe if you deconstructed, did your view of art change? If so, how? If you're a Christian, leave a comment telling me if you disagree or agree and why not or why. Also, tell me your experiences with the Satanic Panic, because the Satanic Panic comes in many different forms. And I feel like each decade, the Satanic Panic is very much attached to obviously the culture at the time. So right now it is very intertwined with QAnon conspiracy theories and the political climate. So that's been great to watch, the Satanic Panic mixing with QAnon conspiracy theories. It's a beautiful cocktail to watch come together. But anyways, I hope you're all are doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.